Hey everyone, welcome back to Traveling in a New Vegan World Summit 2022. I'm Donna Zeigfinger, one of the organizers of the summit, and we are happy to have you all joining us for this session. I would love to introduce you to Jason McGregor, and he is with Vegan Vacations, and we are both going to be talking about cruelty-free travel. But before we start, we have a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to ask questions in the live chat and add your comments. And also, replays will be available within 24 hours of the talk ending, and they will be available until the 5th of February. And with that, we're going to start. Hey, Jason.
Hey, Donna, how are you?
Good.
Well, thank you for having me. As you said, I think everybody knows we are both travel agents running full service travel agencies that help vegan and veggie clients book some amazing experiences. I'm really excited to talk about cruelty-free travel with you today and whether or not it's a reality. And thank you for having me.
And it's my passion. So I'm really
happy.
You know, I'm happy to have you in here because you're a little more articulate about things than I am. So let's go with that.
So let's start off with, what is cruelty-free travel? And Donna and I were having a conversation before we jumped on the recording, and it really, to bring it down to what ultimately it is, it's no harm to animals, period, before, during, and after your trip. And then the question that we're going to try and answer today is that even possible? I don't know, Donna, do you have any thoughts on that before we actually get started, or?
It's as possible as you can make it. Let's put it that way. Does that make sense?
See if, of course, and let's see as we chat if we're able to make it even more of a possibility for people. I just wanted to point out, I really love this quote from Joaquin Phoenix. It takes nothing away from a human to be kind to an animal. I think that's the way Donna and I both approach everything that we do, and I'm sure many of you who are watching this presentation are the same. I know we wanted to start off by chatting about sort of where cruelty-free and animal welfare has come from and the history of it. For those of you who are unaware, a lot of animal welfare discussion started in the early 1960s. And in 1965, it was Britain who actually, their Farm Animal Welfare Council came up with these 5 freedoms of animal welfare that, as you can see by the slide, freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, or disease, freedom from expressing normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. These 5 freedoms were really where animal welfare got its start. The understanding that animals do have feelings, and animals can experience discomfort and pain in their life, and the hope was that they were going to mitigate that and try and stop that from happening to animals in a lot of different fronts. It started with sort of farming of animals, and it expanded from there, but these were sort of the 5 freedoms that the world looked at from 1965 up until the mid-90s. And that's where it actually developed from the 5 freedoms to the 5 domains of animal welfare. And it was a professor and a doctor who came up with this in 1994 as a new tool of assessing animal welfare, because they realized that, well, the 5 freedoms were really great at helping ensure that an animal had some quality of life, that it didn't touch on everything. So the 5 domains focus on nutrition, environment, health, and behavior, and then also acknowledge the fact that animals have a mental state that we have to take into account as well. And I think what they came up with and they realized through their studies is that the first four of these domains all tie back into the mental state of an animal, and the fact that the mental state of an animal is should be the primary focus of what we're trying to do. If we go on to the next slide, this is just a visual sort of the five domains showing how things like nutrition, health, environment, and the behavior can tie back to the mental well-being of an animal. If there's not enough food, they're going to have thirst, hunger, and malnutrition, which is going to negatively affect their mental state. And same with health and the environment and behavior. So yeah, did you know much about the domains before and the freedoms before we chatted?
No.
Yeah, it was really interesting to research, and it's kind of where I started when I started Vegan Vacations was, okay, where is animal welfare and what is cruelty-free? Because cruelty-free travel is something that I think ties really well with vegan travel, because most vegans are very cognizant of animals and their well-being. So I think it's really important for us as travelers to understand these things and to make sure that when we're traveling, we're taking them into account. What are your thoughts on that, Donna?
You know, there's so much to learn about all of this. It's just kind of, it's kind of crazy. When you think you know everything, you don't, and I learned a lot in the past month just doing some investigative reporting, if you will, on just this very factor. But so some of the organizations that I like, my top one, I would say, would be Animal Aid, but I'm also very aware of the Best Friends Animal Society. They actually have a sanctuary out in Utah, and I've taken people out there, and, I've also sent people out there. It's an amazing place we can talk about later. Humane Society International is another one which I'm really close to, and I mean I'm close to all of them, but those are my top three ones that I really look at as my inspiration for cruelty-free travel. But there are thousands of organizations doing this, so it's really it's a lot of important work that they're all doing.
I would totally agree. In terms of travel, we were talking about this earlier. The organization that I always look to is the World Animal Protection. They've really partnered and really taken the focus of cruelty-free into the travel sphere, and they've partnered with a lot of large travel companies. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but in terms of cruelty-free travel, they're definitely at the top of that list, because a lot of these organizations deal with animal welfare, but they're on a lot of different fronts. Like, as you can see, the International Primate Protection League, they're really focused on primates and how to help that species of animal. Whereas some of the larger organizations are focused on farming, some of them are focused on, making sure that cruelty-free is taken into account with health products. It's not all about the travel, and I think that's why cruelty-free is such a larger topic. And within that, I think there are a multitude of areas that we could be looking at. And as you said, there's thousands of organizations across the world, each doing something a little bit different. And sometimes they're not always the best organizations. So we recommend, doing your research about an organization before you jump in and support them wholeheartedly, that you understand their history, how their employees and their committees are paid, if there is payments, what your donation dollars are going to support. Because you can't really tell things just from reading, the bio of an organization. You really have to sort of dig deep to be able to see how are they created, how are they operating, where are they operating,
where the money's going to.
Yeah, and because it's surprising that a lot of organizations that I thought were doing really great work are doing really great work, but a lot of the funds that are coming in are going to support administrative costs rather than going to supporting the animals. And for me, I want to make sure that the hard-earned dollars that I am supporting an organization with are going right back to those animals and are going to affect positive change and not going to necessarily line someone's pockets. What are your thoughts, Donna?
Yeah.
Have you done a lot of research on?
Yeah, I have. I mean, a lot of, so sometimes these organizations, you think that the money's being lined in their pockets when actually they have different aspects that they use, like the Humane Society of the United States. Their money goes into legislative work. It it doesn't necessarily go into, I don't know, let's cut that out.
But to me, Donna, like, the money going into legislative work is totally important. And I think, knowing that the money is being used wisely,
Right.
and that the organization is being run really efficiently,
yes,
is the key, especially when you're looking in the travel sphere, because as we'll talk about, not everything is equal.
Right.
When you go to experiences, even when you're using specific terms within the travel industry, it can get really tricky to understand what you're reading.
Right.
You and I were talking about being careful of sales tactics.
Right. So there's no globally accepted code of conduct governing for wildlife tourism. I mean, you go on some of these safaris, there is no conduct, there's no rules or regulations on these safari tours. So you really need to be careful. So every venue or tour operator can claim that their animals are happy and taken care of, and you see all these cute little pictures, but is that a reality? There's very few animal or elephant sanctuaries in Asia that I would consider clean or good, so I think there's maybe one. And
actually, do you know what's really funny, Donna? In researching more for our presentation, I actually came across a great resource from the World Animal Protection, where they actually list their certified elephant experiences across the planet, and that list is a couple of pages long. So I think slowly but surely there are people that are going out and trying to do a lot of this work, but a lot of these companies have really slick marketing. Right. And you go to a website and you see beautiful imagery of animals in wild habitats and just living their life, and you think that that's the experience you're going to have, and without that actual research, you might find yourself in a place where you're not getting the experience you thought you would. So I think it's great because organizations are starting to put together and compile these lists for people. Right. But like you said, you can't trust that if you type in, safe elephant experience or, trusted elephant habitat or sanctuary, that you're necessarily going to get in that Google ranking the best ones. You have to kind of look beyond that.
Yeah, so ultimately it's up to us to end this, and to take a stand for animal rights and animal welfare, and we need to, do certain things, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And you need to watch out for keywords and just trust your judgment when researching all of this.
It's kind of like when you're traveling as a vegan traveler, and you've got questions about what your food is, or questions about, certain things that are coming up in your trip. And then you just notice that you're not getting the answer in a way that feels like you're getting a truthful answer. And I mean, I call it my spidey senses. They can tingle. And I think a lot of us, when we start to question an organization, whether it's a tour operator, an animal sanctuary, or one of these organizations that is working towards animal welfare, if you spend a few minutes having a conversation with people, you can really find out what their motivations are. And if you start asking questions about animal welfare, somebody who has done their research, they'll have the answer for you, because it's at the core of their their being and the core of their organization. And when Donna and I chat with clients about, what their vacation dreams or hopes are, we start the conversation off about how did they become a vegan? What is their motivation for being vegan? And if it is that they really don't want to be cruel to animals and animal welfare is a priority, we can usually just start talking to them about all the research that we've done and all the organizations that we know that we've worked with that have proven that they are doing good work. Whereas if somebody was a travel agent, I'm using that as the example, Donna, because we're on here, and they don't have that knowledge or experience, you'll notice they're tripping up on their words and they're really unable to give you that sort of peace of mind.
Like saying vegan.
Yeah, if they say totally, or if they don't know the key words about, the difference between a sanctuary, the difference between a zoo, the difference between, cruelty-free and animal welfare, and just not understanding the scope of what we're talking about here today, within 5 minutes, you will really know where their stand is. And that's probably going to be like, okay, you don't have the answers I need. It's probably better for you to start looking at other places and experiences that might align more with your values and morals. So what to watch out for?
So this is something that you and I talked about, allowing contact between wildlife and people. And this includes horseback riding or llama riding or elephant riding, petting or holding or washing a wild animal. I guess the elephants, I guess there's that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So one thing we're going to talk about right now and get this out of the way. I actually was at a COVID meeting last night, and it was all about wildlife. But this doesn't just pertain to wildlife. It also pertains to sanctuaries, which we can get into. COVID is a real thing between humans to humans, but it's also a real thing between animals and humans. And no, quote, sanctuary.
Right. Animals and humans, yeah.
Right. No wildlife sanctuary in particular should ever allow you to handle wildlife at all, during this time, because they can get COVID, and it is a serious thing, and it is an epidemic right now.
We've actually had in Ontario, Donna, we've had a couple of cases of deer contracting COVID through interaction with humans out in the wild. And so you're absolutely right. It's something we still don't have all the information. So it's better to err on the side of caution and make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep the wildlife wild.
Right. And they talked about doing the safaris. They also talked about zoos in particular, because these animals are confined. And so they are spreading the virus within themselves, but we as humans are also giving it to them. So we have to be really mindful of all of this. And this includes farm animal sanctuaries, farm animal sanctuaries tend to be more hands-on because they like volunteers, and you can touch them because they're domesticated animals. But I think right now is not the time for that. And a lot of these animal sanctuaries are closed just for that reason alone right now. They're not allowing, or they're limiting the amount of people coming in.
And when you say closed, they're not closed, they're still operating, they're trying to be cognizant. Yeah, they're being cognizant of making sure that they're not spreading COVID or that they're impacting the animals negatively.
Right.
And I think that plays into the next one, Donna. We really don't want to interfere with wildlife or their habitats.
Right.
Would you shout at a human to get their attention? Would you stomp through somebody else's home or throw garbage somewhere? I think as travelers, it's really important, if cruelty-free is really something that we want to abide by and that we want to live under, that we really have to make sure it's kind of like camping. Like, you leave the landscape as you found it, no trace of humans. And, if you do interact with wildlife, that you do it at a safe distance for both the animal and yourself.
Yeah, I used to work with a tour company, which they're no longer around, but it was called Tread Lightly. So, and basically that's what they were all about, is leaving no trace behind.
Yeah,
So, yeah, and when it comes to things like animals with chains or leashes or cages or photographs, those are the kinds of things you need to like stay away from. And if you see any that are doing this, they need to be reported. So there's
yeah.
that.
You also, if you know, it's about making sure that the wild animal is not being deprived of basic needs or causing any distress or suffering. You know, making sure that the facility that you're going to is providing adequate food, water, shelter, and care. We'll talk a little bit more about sanctuaries and how there's some regulation that's starting to appear, but animals should have room to be able to live their life. They should be able to play and hide. And some sanctuaries have animals that have been living terrifying existences.
Right.
And they're trying to give them a retirement, so to speak. We were talking about this earlier, that sort of sanctuaries in a lot of cases are for these animals that have been put through terrible abuse. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the space, and we're just letting them have an opportunity to enjoy their life a little bit more than they might have before they were at the sanctuary.
Yeah, there was a sanctuary that I went to in Pennsylvania. I haven't been there in years. It's a wolf sanctuary, and that is an amazing place. They have them in their separate packs so they can actually be together, and they have a lot of entertainment for themselves, a lot of interaction from themselves. Not allowed to touch them at all, nor would I want to.
And I think
And
I think it's important that a lot of the places, that you go to, you've mentioned Africa, a lot of the safari companies now are being a lot more cognizant about, they've got the reserve, but the reserve is huge. The animals are just able to roam and enjoy their life.
right.
And the safaris are there just to witness what is happening, the majesty of what is happening in front of you. You're not really meant to interact with them. Now, if you do those fancy luxury glamping sort of experiences, you can really get up close and personal with some of the wildlife, but it's about them coming to you and you just kind of observing, rather than having them for, like this last point talks about, for entertainment purposes. It's not about performing tricks or being a prop or doing something unnatural, or I jokingly put that rabbit with the glasses on because of sales tactics, but we don't want to be doing that. Yeah, we don't want to be doing that to animals, right?
Right. And just even the things like what you were saying, with the animals should come to you. If you're going to a swim with the dolphins event, you better make sure that swim with the dolphins event is a wild event. In other words, okay, so again, years ago, there was a company that would do swimming with the dolphins, but they would take you out on a chartered boat in the middle of nowhere, and you may or may not see the dolphins. The dolphins had to come to you. That's the way it needs to be. It should not, it should never be that they're in captivity. These animals should come to you. I believe that Virgin Voyages does have something like that, where you go out on a boat and the dolphins come to you, and that's the only way that it should be.
Yeah, and I think again, you've got to. It's part of the research that we do for our clients, and that if you're going to be booking your own travel, that you should be doing is making sure that you understand. Okay, how are we going to interact with them? Like, great, you're going to have a dolphin experience. There's some people who absolutely don't want to interact with animals, but there are safe ways to do it, and organizations that are trying, like you said, to go into a natural habitat and just see and witness. Like whale watching is another one. Like you can go to a lot of whale watching tours up here in Canada, where again, it's all about we can't guarantee that you're going to see an animal. We are going to take you to places where we know there are animals for you to possibly see, but it's really about the animal. We're going to their home, and we have to be respectful, and we have to be ensuring that, we're just, again, observing, not performing.
Yeah.
The other
So
thing that I like to make sure that people know about is the fact that we want to remove any sort of breeding or trading of animals. That's another gray area for a lot of people about cruelty free, and a reason why a lot of people who want to go cruelty free travel route is that they don't want to visit zoos, because a lot of zoos are in the habit of breeding and trading. That's a larger topic of conversation, I think. But for those of us that are looking to have a cruelty-free experience, you really want to make sure they're not making any profits on that, and that they're really just trying to rescue, rehabilitate, and when it's safe to do so, release wild animals.
right.
Because I think the other thing people forget is that sometimes a wild animal, especially if they've been caught when they were really young, they might not be able to be released to the wild. So to me, sanctuaries and a lot of certified zoos are really important, because they are saving some of these animals and trying to give them some semblance of life and, enjoyment after they've gone through the experiences they've had.
There's only one place that has the word zoo in it that I totally trust, and I'm sure that there's probably others. There's a place in Belize, and it's called the Belize Zoo, and it's actually a zoo. It's not a zoo. It's actually a sanctuary for animals that cannot get out into the wild because they've been injured, because something's happened to them, and they cannot release them out into the wild at all. So sometimes you do have to look at other things besides the wording on that, which we'll talk about later. But if you see any animals performing tricks, I won't name the name of the companies or the resorts, or if you see any photographic props, and what I mean by props are these little tiny, the baby lions, or or for any other unnatural and humanized activities, just stay away from them. And if you see anything that's happening, we're going to talk about this, you need to report it to the authorities. So next
100%.
slide.
And that's part of our more things to consider, right?
Right.
Looking at the online reviews and online details about organization tours and experiences, and then submitting your own reviews. So
Right.
once you've had an experience, let not only you and I learned when we chatted with somebody at one of our events earlier this year about the fact that you don't want to immediately jump online and negatively review something, because that could deter them possibly making a positive change. I think what is better is to contact that organization directly before you do the online review,
Or
to say,
hotel.
hey,
Yeah.
or hotel, whoever that is, the tour company. My clients, we have a quick chat once they get back from their vacation. I'm sure you do too, Donna, where we go over the different components that we booked. And then I get in touch with that organization or that tour company. I let them know what our client's experience was like. If there was anything that triggered them, or anything that was an animal stressed, or something that was the things to watch out for, I tell these organizations, so that way they can affect some positive change.
Right.
Because I think sometimes we like to scream it to the top of the rafters, but it just means that those animals are probably just going to keep living the experience that they are.
Right.
And potentially that organization is not going to move forward like we want them to. So I'm going to start making sure that when I do get to start traveling again more regularly, that I am contacting them more to say, hey, I really enjoyed this. This was really great. I felt good about this. Here's things that I think you can work on. Here's things that were like totally breaking my heart as a traveler who's concerned with animal welfare. And I encourage everybody else to do the same, because it's kind of like us as vegan travelers. We're gonna get more options the more we tell these organizations that we care about these issues. And like Donna said, it's really our responsibility as socially responsible travelers to affect that change.
And if you see anything, or let's put it this way, you've gone to the hotel, you've gone to the resort, or you've gone to this location, organization that is doing this, which I wouldn't recommend doing that anyway. But if you go to a hotel or some other area and you see these things happening and it's just downright cruel or disgusting, you need to report it to the local associations or organizations if you see any animals stressed or being, inhumanely treated. So you do need to speak up.
And you also need to be prepared that you might be triggered. I know we've talked about this, Donna. We do a lot of extensive research for our clients, but our research is as much as we can do. And we may not know if a hotel, for example, or a resort has added something like, we're going to put an animal on your shoulder and let you take a photo with them, because sometimes those happen on a local level,
right,
and aren't really advertised, but is something that's offered sort of casually. So right. I always recommend that my clients who are concerned about cruelty-free and animal welfare, that you're just prepared that there may be some triggers out there. You could be on a walking tour of a town, and there could be somebody offering photos or offering an animal experience where it looks like the animal's completely fine with it, but you don't know how that animal came to that experience. You don't know if they've been drugged or if they have been, hurt to be more docile. So you just need to be prepared that when you go to these places that you may see things that you're not too happy with. And the only way we're going to be able to ensure that it doesn't is that we let these businesses know that it's not acceptable.
Right. So don't forget, now there's other things that we need to talk about.
It's not just animal welfare, not just in terms of an experience, right?
Right. There's things like toiletries or bedding or luggage or furnishings or decor or souvenirs or food. Toiletries, you want to make sure. First off, I bring my toiletries for the most part. When I went on my cruise recently, I didn't have to because the toiletries were all vegan and cruelty-free. Mm-hmm. So you need to check with the hotel or the cruise line or the, resort that they have cruelty-free toiletries. Otherwise, bring your own. As far as the bedding goes, I'm always asking the hotels to please make sure that there are no feather pillows for my clients and that there's no wool, blankets and so on. Luggage is a little harder for me because I find that weekend luggage bags you can get a lot of them that are, well, I shouldn't say that, it is changing, but a lot of the weekend luggage bags are vegan these days. And actually, the more that I'm thinking about it, there are some, they're not plastic, they're like metal bags on rollers. Is that what it is? It's like so there are some, vegan luggage companies or companies that do vegan luggage. The small luggage company that I'm thinking about is Matt and Nat. They do weekend bags. But I think that Samsonite.
I have one of their weekend bags, and it has lasted me quite some time. It's it's great quality. And like you said, it's vegan. So you know that they're already taking animals into consideration.
Right. It's a vegan company. Yeah. But I think that Samsonite and some of the other companies do the larger bags. That's just more recent. It was for a long time. I had the hardest time finding a vegan luggage company or a company that does vegan luggages. Now, furnishings is a little different because you'll go into your hotel room and you'll find chairs that are, covered in leather. Mm-hmm. That's not as easy to take care of, but it can be done. You could ask them to take it out. I don't know what you would replace with a chair, but there should be ways to do that. Souvenirs,
the souvenirs are huge. Like you have to make sure that you're looking at what is the material that was made for that, where was that made,
Right.
how was it made? Because a lot of local souvenir shops will have local items that you'll find out were made from tusk or made from fur or made from some part of the of an animal that is local. And a lot of people don't think about it until they've purchased it and they're walking away. That you should be thinking about the cruelty-free aspect from what you're bringing home, because
Well,
again,
not,
you're just encouraging them.
well, not only that, but if you just brought up to my mind, if you're bringing home a tusk, you can get caught at the TSA,
100%.
and you can get fined for it. So you need to make sure that whatever you're bringing home is legal, but also you want to make sure that it's not an animal or an
Now,
animal.
I don't think anybody who's watching our cruelty-free travel talk, Donna, would be contemplating of bringing home a tusk, but I think it's
But
totally valid.
but sometimes you don't know, like
Yeah,
sometimes you
yeah,
actually don't know. It might look like something and it's actually something else. So you have to
yeah.
ask too.
Ask.
So you want to talk about the food?
But
Food.
yeah, well, I was just
I'm all about food.
well, I think we all are. And on a vegan travel summit, we're going to be talking about it. But I think it's really important because a lot of people, when they think about the cruelty free, just think about the animal experiences, the horseback riding, the dolphin experiences, and they're not thinking about these little extra bits right off the top. But food is already a prime focus of our business. I mean, most of the tour operators and the hotels that we're talking about, we're trying to show them that, yes, it's great that you're able to accommodate vegans from your food, but that's not all that it is. It's all about looking at the entire experience and how to remove animals. Food is just kind of where I think they've all started. Like, personally, I think a lot more of them are seeing how easy it is to accommodate those of us eating a plant-based diet. And now we're just trying to teach them that veganism is not just a plant-based diet, it's a lifestyle.
Right.
But again, it's one of those things where your food, even to, broths and, things that are added into it that you might look at a dish and they like, don't worry, it's just some vegetables in some sauce, but you don't realize that the sauce has been made from
Fish
animal
sauce.
bone or fish sauce or something like that.
Right.
So you have to be cognizant that food is like is a big one, and one that's easily missed by a lot of people. And it's shocking to me,
Yeah.
if I might add, that quite a few plant-based travelers haven't realized all the other ways that cruelty can play into their vacation. They start on the food.
Yeah, they start on the food and then they go to other things. But, there are some, if you're concerned about the food in a country where you don't speak the language, there are some language apps that you can use where you talk into the app and it'll say how to say what you are in their language. So
I'll add to that, Donna. I was just talking to somebody today about Google Translate. They now have an app with Google Translate that you can download onto your phone. And that app allows you to actually scan ingredient lists on products if you happen to be going to a grocery store and it's in another language, and it will automatically translate it for you. You can also open up your app and have the person in the other language speak into your app and it will translate it to English, and then you can speak and it will translate it into the language. So we're getting so much more opportunity for people to be able to interact rather than just trust that the person nodding at you saying that it's going to be all right, that you actually can find out the answers to the questions and make sure that what you are experiencing, or if, bedding is huge for you, that if you're standing in a hotel lobby, you can speak to somebody and translate it pretty easily.
Great.
Yeah. The other thing that is on here is we have to remember our action and our choices can affect animals their entire life. Young animals that are held in captivity, usually they have things done to them that means they cannot return to the wild safely. So, You know, there may be young animals that end up at a sanctuary or end up, you know, being given a reprieve, but the reason they need to be held captive is because they wouldn't be safe outside in the wild anymore. So we really need to start making sure that our choices right from the get-go are taking into account how animals are experiencing the world, because it could have an effect on them forever. This is where we're going to chat about animal sanctuaries, Donna.
Yeah, so, in the past, I would say 15 years, and I actually am very involved with one particular sanctuary in the DC area, but there has been an explosion of sanctuaries in recent years. You've got Poplar Spring Animal Sanctuary, which is the one I work with. You've got the one up in New York, Farm Sanctuary. There's hundreds. I think there's like 100 or more farm animal sanctuaries in the US alone. But as far as sanctuaries around the world, you still have to do your research, because that word sanctuary is not a regulated term. And in fact, many facilities operating under that term sanctuary umbrella don't adhere to any of the standards of animal care or animal welfare. On the other hand, you've got, and I mentioned this organization before, you've got to figure out what the wording is, and you have to look at what they're doing. The Belize Zoo is a wonderful sanctuary. It's an actual sanctuary, and people from zoos actually from around the world will come and look and see what they're doing. These are animals that cannot go back into the wild. They've been abused, they've for whatever reason, and they cannot go back into the wild. So, but it's not a zoo.
Yeah,
the term
and
zoo.
it's totally right. I mean, we up here in Canada, like you, in Ontario, there's now over 55 registered sanctuaries. And Ontario, our province, has actually created an association for trying to regulate and give a little bit more clarity to what a sanctuary is. I was shocked to learn in Canada how many sanctuaries are like weeks away from going bankrupt because they don't have enough funding to be able to help, and they rely so heavily on visitor experiences, like coming to help feed or help volunteer on the sanctuary. And I think a lot of these organizations are trying to go, we have to make sure that the animals are being taken care of course, the 5 domains, the 5 freedoms, but that it's making sure that this organization has the funding to continue long term. Because having a ton of sanctuaries that are on the verge of bankruptcy is not beneficial by any means, because those animals could end up in a worse situation if there's nobody to take them, if a sanctuary is to go down. And a lot of people start a sanctuary small, sort of home-based. It's usually a couple that goes and buys a piece of land and says, we're giving this back to the animals. And they mean the absolute best for all of the animals, but they realize just how difficult it is to run a sanctuary. And I like the fact that we've got more of these organizations locally and provincially and stateside that are, trying to at least get some sort of semblance of, here's what a regulation looks like. I found that Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to introduce you to my adopted daughter. On the left side, she's in both photos here. Her name is Julianne, and I met her in, I don't know, 2018, I believe it was the first time I actually met her. She is a donkey. It's a donkey sanctuary in Ireland. They do tours, but I don't know if they're doing tours right now. On the left side, she was the first donkey that was born in the sanctuary. So she's never seen any cruelty in her life. She's just really shy. So this first picture on the left side, I'm pointing in the other direction here, where she's in the barn. She didn't want to come out. She's a princess too, I will tell you. It was drizzling. It wasn't raining. It was just drizzling. And she did not want to come out and see me. So she just stood there and looked at me. And the second one was the more recent one in 2019, which was the last time I was there. And she did come out and see me. And I adopt her every year. And I
Yes.
adore her. She's very sweet. And they have over 700 donkeys in that sanctuary at any given time. Yeah, it's an amazing place. There's one in the
Yeah.
UK as well, but this is the one I know. It's in an area called Mallow, Ireland, so it's in the south. Great place. But anyway, let's go back. I just
And I
wanted to
think, I
introduce
think,
you to her.
well, I'm very happy to meet her. And I think you brought up another good point about the adopting. You know, there are possibilities of being able to support sanctuaries in really unique ways. And one of them is you can adopt pets, you can buy, you know, bales of hay, you can just offer something that's a little bit different than just necessarily donating directly to the sanctuary. A few of my friends this year received as Christmas gifts little adoptions and things like that. So that way they, through the year, can get updates about the animal. And I think sometimes those gifts go over even better than anything I could have bought them at a store,
Right.
because they know that it's giving back. And they now have an opportunity to go somewhere and meet this animal and just, you know, experience the animal, experience the sanctuary. And most of the friends that I've given these gifts to, they end up continuing that support going forward, which I
Yeah.
think is really great. We were talking about the fact that there are some organizations in the US and globally that are looking at animal sanctuaries and trying to ensure that there's more of a framework that these sanctuaries can be held to, apart from just the freedoms and domains of animal welfare. Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries is probably the largest. They've been around since 2007. And they are actually going to sanctuaries and looking at the operations, going through the financial books of the group. And they don't only give them a check mark or an X, they actually try and educate them on how they might be able to change things to operate more efficiently, or to use suggestions from other sanctuaries in other parts of the world, which I think is fantastic, because I think the problem is a lot of these sanctuaries are so small that they're really unable to sort of find out what other sanctuaries are doing, and there's no real connection between them, which is starting to happen. And you know, the American Sanctuary Association is another one locally in your
That's
country.
been around for
And
years, many, many years.
yeah,
So
and
yeah.
they're actually, I was impressed with the fact that in US, the ASA is actually inspecting these sanctuaries twice a year to make sure they're adhering to the Animal Welfare Act. And I think
Right.
that's so important, because we can, somebody can tell us that they're doing the best for the animal, but if they're not adhering to the laws of the country, we have nothing. So I was really impressed to see that they're starting to go out and actually inspect these, because now there's sort of certified sanctuaries that you can visit where it takes a bit of the guesswork out for you. So we also wanted to look at the bigger picture. Donna and I were, you know, we were putting together this presentation, and we realized that, you know, cruelty free, as we said, is not just about the animal experiences and tours. It's not just about all those things that you could find in your hotel or at your resort. It's also about looking at the bigger picture here, is that the way we've been traveling so far has not really taken animal cruelty or animal welfare and put it at the top of the list. It's always been something that, you know, we think about after the fact, right?
Right.
So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Donna?
I mean, so you're looking at sustainable and environmental travel. What are your thoughts?
Yep.
You know, what do you consider environmental and sustainable? Waste and pollution. We know that some of the cruise lines are some of the biggest polluters in the world, but, you know, a lot of the hotels can be as well. So you have to take all that in consideration.
Mhm.
over tourism, which is like my big thing right now. And if you don't know, it's a fairly new term. But what over tourism is about is not necessarily about animals, but it's about the overall picture. If you know, a lot of people like to go to Venice. Venice was a big example, and so is Key West. You know, there were so many people down there that they can't handle that anymore. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. It's too much. And I tend to want to stay away from those kinds of places anyway. You want to
Yeah.
understand tourism infrastructure, and you know that affects animals as well, and animal
Well, as
habitat.
we were talking about, sorry, Donna, I was just
No,
going to
that's
say
okay.
the in terms of the tourism infrastructure, it's understanding, that sometimes the locals are creating experiences because they know it's going to bring travelers, and it's so important to help their local community and
Right,
make sure that they're thriving. But there are some places that are really making sure that the animal habitats are not being negatively affected. And then
right,
there's other places where it's just bulldoze the entire area, put the hotel in, and people are going to come. And then they try and sprinkle in, you know, animal habitats here and there. But what was lost prior to that resort being built? Or,
right.
what did the animals have to give up for us to have this experience? And I think it's more, as we're thinking about cruelty-free travel, that it's sort of these things are sort of the next level in terms of how you should be thinking about how you're traveling.
Right.
We
And
were talking prior to, sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, we could go into a whole nother segment on, you know, over tourism and human rights tourism and so on. That's like a whole nother
Yep.
segment on that, which maybe we'll do that
Yep.
next year.
If everybody wants it, let us know in the chat box,
Yeah.
because we will do a session on that. But it's just, these were sort of things I think we wanted everybody to also look at from that cruelty-free perspective, because it is more than just the animal welfare part in terms of experiences. I did want to say, Donna, on this slide, that a lot of companies are starting to understand how important this is, that if we don't have these wild habitats, if we don't have these natural areas that we can go and visit, there is no tourism in a lot of cases.
Right.
So we need to be cognizant of everything that goes into our trip. And we were talking about the fact that some of our clients, they try and figure out ways to mitigate their negative effects of their trips. There's some people that are looking at carbon offsetting. There are some people that are looking back at giving to the local community. I have some clients
But be
who
careful with
we
some of those. You know, some of these that
Oh yeah,
supposedly give back to the local community also use animals in those organizations. So you have to be really careful on that.
oh, 100%. And that's why that's why we were saying, do your research. So when my clients have found an organization that is offering like a sanctuary or is offering an experience to be able to give back to the animals, my clients have sometimes taken the entire cost of their trip and said, we're going to give back a portion of that cost to the organizations that we are supporting on this trip, so that way they can continue the work. And that is, for them, ensuring that they're not just going, experiencing, and taking, but that they're giving back, and that hopefully they're able to better the experiences that they'll be able to have and future travelers would have.
And there are some tour companies that will take part of their proceeds and give back to the areas that they were at. So like, for instance, well, there's two instances. One, I used to take people to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary out in Utah. And, you know, I just put in the cost of a donation from each person. So we were able to give over $2,000 on every trip. So I will tell you, for each of my clients that have booked, I, at the end of the year, give a donation. My company, not me, gives a donation to an organization called Trees for the Future, and they will actually plant a tree. You know, you can do it in your name, but because I have so many names, I just do a general donation, and they plant something like 500 trees, and it's like maybe 10 cents a tree. So let's look at some additional resources.
Yeah.
Tell
So,
me about the Animal Protection Index. That was really interesting what you were talking about.
Well, the Animal Protection Index is offered by the World Animal Protection Organization again. And I keep coming back to them. I don't want anybody to think that I'm sponsored by them, but they really do have the most information about travel, and they've spent most of their time, because if you search cruelty free, you're going to find a lot of things that are not travel related. You're going to find healthcare products, you're going to find animal testing, you're going to find farming issues, but World Animal Protection is really focused on the travel sphere and working with people to understand how their travel can affect animals. And this Animal Protection Index is one of their key pieces. It is a website that you can go to that has a map of the world, and it ranks countries based on their animal rights records. Now this goes beyond just whether or not they offer animal experiences. This talks about what are the laws in that country for animals. Do they have an Animal Welfare Act? Do they have rights for animals? What are the penalties and fines if somebody breaks? How do they have reporting? And this really gives you sort of a color-coded yellow, green, orange, red, that sort of experience. So you can look at the map and see right away which country has what experience and whether or not you want to steer completely away from that area. And then you can actually click into each country and you can really dive deep about where they are lacking and where they're really forward thinking. So I tend to go there first when I'm looking at places just for my clients, so I can give them some information about the country. There are some countries that used to be really negatively thought of in terms of the cruelty-free and animal welfare sphere, but they're making a lot of changes. So if you have an opportunity, check that index out. It's always changing. It's live. They're constantly adding more information. From there, the World Animal Protection Organization also has a report that they've started putting out called Tracking the Travel Industry, Tracking the Travel Trade Report. This talks about different organizations and how they're handling animal welfare. We were talking about the Travel Corporation, which has a lot of different tour companies underneath it. They've really adopted and want to adhere to the best possible practices for animal protection. And that company is partnered with an organization called Tread Right, which their whole mandate is about making sure that the 5 domains of animal welfare are being maintained. And they've now recently partnered with the World Animal Protection Organization. And we're starting to see a larger group of businesses that are now saying, no, we're not even, like, it's a non-starter if you have horseback riding. It's a non-starter if you have animal photography. And we won't even work with you if you are offering these little things. And they're training these companies on how to make positive changes.
Clarify animal photography though, because you can go to photography tours. That's a different thing. Wildlife tours that offer photography, but when you've got a little lion that's going to sit on your lap and you're going to take a picture of it, that's just a total non-starter. That's what I think you mean by that. So I just wanted to.
Oh yeah, 100%. And in terms of being able to take photos of wildlife, that's something completely.
Well,
that's okay.
We actually have a session on that, with Jennifer Hanley, who's going to be talking about that. So it's great.
That's great. That's great.
Tread Right they're partnered with the World Animal Protection. Is that correct?
So they partnered with World Animal Protection. They've also partnered with the Travel Corporation, which, as I say, is a larger organization that you and I work with that offer tours. They offer a wide range of tours, but really it's gotten to that each of these businesses under that Travel Corporation umbrella all have to adhere to that. We're not going to offer these animal experiences, and we're actively advocating to not go to places or not have experiences that would put an animal in your lap,
right,
or put an animal on your shoulder, or have an animal doing something unnatural. You know, like no, and I have never seen a wild animal jump up onto a human's lap and sit there for a photo. So I think we can all agree that, you know, those sort of experiences are not conducive with the cruelty-free travel
Right.
experience.
So I love this paraphrase here. Although animals may be different from us, this does not make them any less than us.
Yes,
That's
Mark is he's a biologist that wrote the book Animals Matter, and it talks about the fact that, you know, animals are just trying to navigate this world like we are. We just don't understand fully how they're experiencing it, and it's a fascinating read for anybody who is concerned about cruelty-free travel.
Yeah.
It's a great, he's got some great quotes in there, but definitely a resource.
Great, thank you.
And this was the quote that you shared with me first that I
I
really like, and
know,
it
I
comes
love it.
from World Animal Protection too.
I
So
know. If you can ride it, hug it, or have a selfie with a wild animal, the chances are it's a cruel venue. The only thing I would change about it was I would say if you could ride them or hug them,
yep.
that's the only thing I would change. Other than that, I love this. I love this, you know.
Yeah. And you're totally right. We have to stop looking at animals as its, and we have to start understanding their beings.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think I need to explain that to anybody who's made it this far in our presentation, that's the important thing. But like you know, sometimes we're in an experience and we think everything's, you know, they've taken into account all the animal welfare, and then we realize when we're there, oh no, there's this little bit. Yeah.
Jason, how can we find each other?
Well, you can find us by going to our websites, greenearthtravel.com or veganvacations.ca. I think we have the best of the entire North American market covered. Donna helps clients in the United States book amazing cruelty-free experiences. I help clients in Canada book the exact same things. And if anybody has any questions about cruelty-free travel, or if you want resources, if you
what about your socials? What are your socials?
I am on all the socials, Vegan Vacations or veganvacations.ca. We're most active on Instagram and Facebook right now.
Right.
But we do have other accounts. What social are you on?
So I have Green Earth Travel on Facebook, Vegan Travel on Twitter, although I'm not as active on there. I have Green Earth Travel on Instagram, but we also, Jason, I, and several other people have a Facebook group called Traveling with 2 L's, and that's not my thing.
It's for the Canadian
folks.
It's for the
Canadians and the Europeans. I got outvoted on this. It's called Traveling in a New Vegan World, where we're constantly posting vegan travel tips and ideas, and we actually will have some live workshops as well. And that's how you can find us.
Now, my question for you, Donna, before we wrap up, because it looks like one of our slides disappeared, is do you think cruelty-free travel is a reality today? Because that's what everybody came for. That's the question that we started with. Right. So I think we should answer that question individually before we sign off.
Well, you know, I actually was talking to somebody about environmental cruises, and we all decided that that's not a possibility 100%, even though they're going in that direction. So no, it's not 100%. You cannot ever be in 100% cruelty-free vacation, but you make it the best that you can and as cruelty-free as you can. And that's the best that we can do right now. And you can still, you know, enjoy your vacation as much as you can.
The world's a beautiful place, and I think everybody should be able to explore it as much as possible. I totally agree with you. Are we there with 100% cruelty-free travel? No. Are there people making positive changes? 100%.
Yes.
And I feel like the more support, we say this all the time with vegan offerings, the more we show people that it's an important thing in our lives, the more that these travel companies and these tour operators are going to have more offerings for us. So we just have to be vocal. We have to know what is important to us. What are the experiences that we don't want to have? And we need to just keep demanding those experiences. And I think the best way to do it is to make sure that you work with travel professionals like us, so that that way we can do some heavy lifting. We have contacts all over the world that we are working with constantly to make sure that our clients are having amazing experiences. So you don't have to do this on your own if you're stressed out about it. There are people there to assist you. And if you do come across great resources, contact Donna and I at this information, because if you found an experience that you really like or you really don't like, we're constantly adding that information to our database,
and we
we can ensure. Yeah, we totally listen.
You know,
and whether or not you book with us, we want to just make sure we're information sharing. And that's why I think our Traveling in a New Vegan World Facebook group is so important, because in real time we're getting information from people, and we're able to just create a community together that's, you know, trying to ask for more thoughtful and more amazing experiences.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
this was fun, Jason.
I had a lot of fun.
I'm so glad you joined.
This is a great way to start off. This is a great way for us to start off the conference. Yes. And I hope everybody enjoys the remainder of the sessions. If you haven't signed up for all the talks that are coming up in the next 2 weeks, you're going to be able to sign up for each and every one of them. This talk will be available for replay within 24 hours of our presentation going live. We're going to be checking the live chats throughout the conference, throughout the summit. So be sure to submit your questions, submit your thoughts. We'd love to hear your feedback. And thanks again for having me, Donna. It's been a great chat.
Thank you for joining me.